All right, so for today, our goal is to look at, we have our toolbox. How do you know what's the best tool? Okay, obviously a hammer's the best tool to put a nail in the wall, right? Other ones, will work, but we need to kind of just go back through all of this stuff. So before we get into this problem, let's kind of talk real quick about how do we know? So how do we know if it will factor? Right, because for me, that's always my first option. I'm always looking at, can I factor something? How do you know if it factors? So we know. You just play around with the numbers and see if it works, right? Now, I don't know about you guys, but sometimes that can be frustrating, right? Especially if you have like a lot of options for A and a lot of options for C, like you don't want to play around with it all day. There actually is a way to tell if it factors or not. And what you want to do, it's called the discriminant. Discriminant. We talked a little bit about this the other day. The discriminant is a perfect square. Maybe I should also add the word positive. It is a positive perfect square. And the discriminant is b squared minus 4ac. That's how you find that. Where does that come from? Where have you seen b squared minus 4ac before? Quadratic formula. That's the part that's under the radical, right? You guys remember when we were talking about that on Monday, I kind of like pointed that out, like look at all the ones that actually went further into nice answers, right? I think Sam, was the one who said that. Right, they were perfect squares that time. So if you want to know if it factors, one way you can check that is to check the discriminant. See what b squared minus 4ac is? If that's a positive perfect square, it'll factor. If it's not, it won't factor. Okay, so if you're somebody who's like, I don't want to guess and check until I'm blue in the face to figure this out, check and see what that is. Okay? All right, how do we know if we can use the square root method? Because that doesn't work on everything, right? Good. It must be missing the bx term. And if it's missing the bx, then you can do the square root method. Okay, so that one's easy to tell. And then the other method we have is the quadratic formula. How do you know if you can use the quadratic formula? So I can always use it. Yeah, always works. Now, let me reiterate, it always works on a quadratic equation, right? As long as it's an x squared equation, which is all this chapter is, it'll always work. Now, next chapter, we're going to deal with like x to the cubed, x to the fourth, x to the fifth, x to the sixth. But you can't use the quadratic formula unless it's quadratic x squared, okay? But everything in this chapter, it will. So that will always work. So when you get to the back page of your test on Friday, that back page is going to look like, it's going to have 6 problems on it. I'm going to tell you to use any method you want, but you have to use each method twice. So which method should you do first? Good, the square root method. So when you're doing that, this would be the first thing you look for, is a square root method. Okay, when you get to that part of your test. Because chances are probably only 2 of them will be missing the bx term. Okay, so you want to make sure you use the square root method for those. Then what should you do? Then you should factor, because we know not everything factors. And then the 2 that are left, go ahead and use quadratic formula. Now, if you've gone through, done the square root method or factored, but you're like, I don't know if I did that right, could you check it by doing the quadratic formula? Make sure you get the same thing. Yeah, you should. Okay, if you're unsure if you did it right, go back and try another method and see if it works that way. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to look at a couple different problems today and like how, which ones work for which methods, okay? So the first problem, x squared minus 4x minus 45 equals 0. It's already set equal to 0. So first to tell if it factors or not, let's look at the discriminant. If I would look at b squared minus 4ac, just so you guys can get some practice telling if that factors or not. So b squared would be negative 4 squared minus 4 times a is 1, c is negative 45. So what is that? So we get 196. Is 196 a perfect square? Oh, it's not? Oh, sorry. My thing must have flipped and I didn't notice it. Sorry. We'll go back to the first page. My bad. Is 196 a perfect square? Grab your calculator. Type in square root of 196. Is it pretty? It's 14. Okay, so since that is a positive perfect square, that means that problem will factor. Okay, so that's how you can tell. Now that one, again, there's no a value, so it might have been easy for you to recognize that it does factor. But if you have one that has like a lot of options for a, a lot of options for c, and you're like, I don't want to play around with it, then just check that. If b squared minus 4ac is a perfect square, positive, then you know it will factor. Okay, so let's go ahead and factor it. So set up your parentheses. My last one is negative. So what are your signs? Plus and minus. Options for a. 1 and 1, so 1x and 1x. And then options for c, or do you know which one it is? All right, so you have what, 1 and 45, 5 and 9, and we also had, was it 3 and 15? And yeah, 5 and 9 is one's going to work. Which one's negative? It'd be the 9. Right, that way we get 5x minus 9x gives me the negative 4 in the middle. All right, and then we set each one equal to 0 and solve. All right, so x equals negative 5 and x equals 9. Factoring, I like that. What about the square root method? Why? Good. It's got to be x. It's got that 4x in there, so I cannot use the square root method on this problem. Quadratic formula? Yeah, I can always use that one. Yeah, we're going to do it. Of course we are. So x equals, now, negative b is going to make that a positive 4, plus or minus. Are you guys okay if I just jump right to the square root of 196? Because I already did that math, right? I checked it right there. All over 2 times a, so 2 times 1. And what did we say the square root of 196 was? 14. All over 2. Then we want to look, can I divide all 3 numbers? Yep, I can divide them all by 2. So we get 2 plus or minus 7. There's no radical, there's no I. So what's 2 plus 7? And 2 minus 7, negative 5. Holy crap, I got the same answer I got when I factored it. Is that like a miracle? Every year I always have a couple students who are like, oh my gosh, you got the same thing. Yeah, I solved the same problem. I should get the same answer, okay? If you don't get the same answer, something's really wrong somewhere, okay? But that is a nice way. If you're like, I don't know if I did it right, try another method. See if it works. But which method do you like better on that problem? Oh yeah, factoring's way faster, a lot less work. Oh, let's go back to your front page. Sorry, I did not realize that it did not start on the first page. Sorry. All right, so let's see. How do I tell if it factors? You want to check what? The discriminant. Before I check the discriminant, what would you have to do with this problem? Yeah, I gotta set equal to 0 to check that, so I have to minus the 57. Right, but I'm just trying to see, we're just, for sake of right now, we're just trying all the methods and kind of seeing if they work or not. So we would get 2x squared minus 72 equals 0. So checking to see if it will factor, we try the discriminant, right? So I'm looking at b squared minus 4ac. So what's your b value? 0. So 0 squared minus 4 times 2 times negative 72. At 576. Is 576 a perfect square? What'd you say? 24. Square root of that's 24. So will it factor? Yeah. Since the discriminant is a perfect square, then I know it will factor. Okay? So we had 2x squared minus 72 equals 0. So how do I factor that? Say that again. Before that, well, take out the 2. Remember that GCF, first thing we always look for? Take out the 2. We're left with x squared minus 36. And then how does that factor? Now I'll set up my parentheses. 1 and 1, so 1x and 1x. What are my signs? Plus and minus, right? Because my last one's negative. Good. Yeah, guys, this is your difference of squares. On the quiz that we took over factoring, some of you still faltered on the difference of square ones. Remember I told you when I first taught those? They are the easiest ones, but the most missed. People overthink them. Right? It's like you have a 0x in the middle. So 6x minus 6x, those are going to cancel out. Right? So then, does baby brother give me an answer? No, there's no x there. I don't care about baby. Ignore him. Some of you still try to put him in your answer. Ignore him. So when we solve, we get x equals negative 6 and 6. I got my two answers. Yeah. There is no bx term in the middle of this problem. So are you talking about the original or this line? Because it's like saying I have 2x squared plus 0x minus 72. There is no middle term with just an x on it. So it's a 0 since there isn't one. All right, square root method. Can I do that one? I heard a no and I heard a yes. Yes, because what am I missing? The bx. So that means I can use the square root method. All right, square root method. So we have 2x squared. We had minus 72 equals 0. We had originally set that equal to 0. Square root method, do I want it set equal to 0? No, I want to isolate the squared. So I'm going to move everything to the other side. So we'll add 72. So 2x squared equals 72. Then what? Good. Then we have to divide by the 2. That x squared has to be totally by itself. So x squared equals 36. Good. Take the square root. So x equals, thank you for the plus minus. All right, anytime you take the square root, your answer has a plus minus attached. We got the same answer. Can I use quadratic formula? I mean, no. Oh, okay. The answer is always yes for quadratic formula. We may not want to, but we can. So what's negative b? Negative 0. Just 0. Yeah, don't write negative 0. That's going to make me irritated. So plus or minus square root 576. I already did math over here. All over 2 times 2. What did we say the square root of 576 was? 24. So x equals 0 plus or minus 24 over 4. Can you divide all three numbers? I love when people tell me no. 0 divided by anything is just, so I can always divide 0. All right, all three numbers I can divide by 4. 0 divided by 4 is 0. 24 divided by 4 is 6, and then be over 1. So what's 0 plus 6? 6, and 0 minus 6 is negative 6. I don't know what it is about the 0. It's like this magical, weird thing that like people just don't know what to do with it. So is it possible to do one problem, all three methods? Yeah, sure is. All right. 2x squared plus 13x plus 21. Is that thing going to factor? How do you tell if it factors or not? The discriminant. What's the discriminant? What's the discriminant? Thank you. B squared minus 4ac. What does this have to be? A perfect square. If that is a perfect square, then it's going to go ahead and factor. Okay? So let's go ahead and check it. So b squared would be 13 squared minus 4 times 2 times 21. And what do we get? 1. Is 1 a perfect square? Yeah, because what's the square root of 1? It's just 1. So yeah, that means since this is a perfect square, it will factor. All right. There is no GCF, so I went ahead and just set up my parentheses then, but you always want to check for the GCF. Last one's positive. Are they both plus or both minus? Both plus. Options for A. 1 and 2. So 1x, 2x. Options for C. 1 and 21. Good. And 3 and 7. So you want to go 1 and 21 or 3 and 7? 3 and 7. You want to go 3 and 7 or 7 and 3? 3 and 7? So 3, 7. Just double checking. That gives me 6x plus 7x. Did that work? Yeah, I got the 13 that I wanted in the middle, so I'm good. All right, so we just set each of them equal to 0 in solve. So x plus 3 equals 0. 2x plus 7 equals 0. So we get x equals negative 3. And x equals, we subtract 7 and divide by 2. Gives me negative 7 halves. Square root method? Nope, it's got to be x term. Quadratic formula? You know you want to. Aw, it's fun. No? All right, so negative b is negative 13 plus or minus square root b squared minus 4. Why am I writing all this down? We already know what it is. It's going to be 1 plus or minus square root of 1 over 2a, which is 4. What's square root of 1 plus u is 1. So negative 13 plus or minus 1 over 4. Can you divide all three numbers? Nope. Do I stop? No, there's no I, there's no radical, so we need to keep going. So what is negative 13 plus 1? It's negative 12 over 4, which gives you negative 12 divided by 4. Negative 3. And then negative 13 minus 1 negative 14 over 4, which gives you, good. Right, divide those both by 2. So a negative 3 and a negative 7 over 2, which is exactly what we got when we factored. But again, if I can factor, I'd rather factor. 1 to go. Why don't you guys try the last one on your own? All right, guys. So your kind of game plan, when you look at that back page of the test trying to figure things out, is you want to check that discriminant first. Try to determine whether or not it factors. Again, this right here has to be a positive perfect square. Okay, if it is, then great, it'll factor. If it's not, then it will not factor, so don't waste your time. All right, so my b squared be 8 squared minus 4 times negative 2 times negative 20. And what did we get for discriminant? Negative 96. Is that a positive perfect square? It's not positive or a perfect square, so that thing is really wrong. So that means it will not factor. Square root method? No, it's got a b term. So ta-da, everyone's favorite, the only option you have, sorry, is that quadratic formula. So x equals negative b would be negative 8 plus or minus square root, we know it is negative 96, we just checked it, over 2 times a, which is negative 2. All right, so we got to clean this up a little bit. So we know that is 3 and 32, 2 and 16, 2 and 8, 2 and 4, 2 and 2. A lot of 2's. So negative 8 plus or minus. See, pair of 2's gives me 4. There was a negative under there, so I know there's an I. And I have a leftover 2 and 3, which is going to make 6, all over negative 4. One thing I want you guys to start to notice is I have a negative on the top and I have a negative on the bottom. 2 negatives makes a positive. So I know this is positive. And then can I divide all 3 numbers? Yep, divide them all by 4. All right, so that's going to give me 2 plus or minus I radical 6. It's all over 1, but you don't have to write it. So 2 plus or minus I radical 6. And that is it. How are we feeling? Feel okay? Understand what the discriminant and how that can help you save a lot of time?